Okay, welcome to our channel once again. It's taken a while for me to load some more videos, but in my last video, I did mention that I was going to be talking about the Renters' Right Act 2027. This actually is a law that gained royal assent on the 27th of October 2025. This was signed by the King Charles III of England. And so now this is a law. What is interesting about this law is the number of people that this law really affects, being total renters in the UK. And not only that, also a law that is currently going to strike a fair balance between the powers of landlords and renters or tenants. Now, this is one of the most important laws that this Labour government under Sir Keir Starmer is actually brought to life. And this, I think, should be gaining a lot more publicity with the public than it has. And so I am taking that opportunity to basically expand on this act and also bring to the awareness of the many renters in the UK what these changes means to them. I mean, naturally, people are so busy and engaged in daily life that they probably don't have time to basically research on these issues. And so I am taking that time to bring that information to the people to see what are the changes and how does that benefit the ordinary renter and what does it mean for the landlords. We'll also be expanding on later videos on what it also means for the UK housing market. What it means for the UK housing market and also what it means for the average person. So you may be a person that doesn't necessarily fall in the category of being a tenant or a landlord, what it means for you in the market. So this is very interesting. And I think that the government, being Sir Keir Starmer, being the PM and the head of the Labour government, should be given a lot of credit and a lot of publicity should be made about this new Renters' Right Act. I understand that there's been a fair amount of negative publicity against the Labour government. It doesn't matter what they do. People are not that impressed. But I suppose we are a nation that is, we are just like that. Every day we will cry for a new government to come, and when they come, as soon as they arrive, they don't even last for a month, and we just jump on that criticism bandwagon, and whatever they do, they don't seem to gain appropriate press support in all the good works, but then we are very quick to pick on the things that are not right. I understand that in recent times, obviously, we had a budget from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and, talking about a black hole and just basically jumping on the population and once again taking so much from the ordinary person. And all these type of things needs to stop, because good governance, what is good governance? Good governance is about the fact that if a government comes to power and they realize that maybe the previous government have maybe misused the nation's finances and maybe they've created a black hole, then in reality what it is that there should be an investigations bureau that will go after where these financial waste is occurred and should bring people to account. And the nation should indeed recover any funds that has been misused by any particular person, any particular minister, any particular government organization or government body, or any business that has taken advantage of the state. So there is that need for accountability to recover these finances rather than always jumping back on the population that are already crying for help to actually come back and pay for these mismanagement of funds. But in effect, today, that is not what this video is about. The video is about the Renters' Right Act. And so we say, what is the Renters' Right Act? The Renters' Right Act has come into force on the basis of rebalancing the power that landlords held over tenants over a long period of time. And I will say this has happened in the times when the Tories were in power for a very long period of time, from the time of David Cameron to the time of Rishi Sunak. This is a very long period of time. And in this time, the landlords were given extreme levels of power. So one of the key powers that they had is the no-fault eviction. That means that a landlord could easily come and evict a tenant and didn't have to give any particular reason for the eviction. And therefore, tenants were very insecure. They were very unsafe. They would live in accommodations that sometimes the ceiling will be falling on them. Accommodation where sometimes it will be mold infested. Accommodation where electric system or gas systems may not have been up to scratch. Accommodation where there isn't some sort of smoke alarm, carbon monoxide detectors, and some of these properties that they were renting out indeed were in very deplorable state. And the tenants, unfortunately, the majority did not have a say. And so this is where the Labour government under Keir Starmer has gone up to the length of basically reviewing and reviving and rebalancing the power between the tenants and the landlords. And this is why they bring this act into power, into force. And so I am going to be looking at what it means to the tenant, what it means to the housing market, what it means to you, the ordinary person, and also to look at what the changes are, obviously, with this new Renters Act, and when the act actually takes effect. So these laws comes into power, but there is a time, well, basically they enact these laws. So the day that the king signs it, gives it the royal assent, is when obviously the bill becomes a law. And so now that has been done as of 27th October 2025 is when the king signed it. But in effect, this should have been a national debate. There should have been a whole lot of publicity, and the government should have been commended for actually doing this kind of thing for the majority, the masses of the population that are renting. But we see that such a thing has not really happened. So before I get into what the details are of this act, I'm just going to look at some figures. So in the UK currently, we have about 69.3 million people in the United Kingdom. So that is the total population as of 2024. And out of that population, 67% of it forms the adult population. So 2/3 are adults, 1/3 are basically minors or people that are not able to engage in contract because they are considered to be under 18. And so that population, the adult population, is 46.4 million as of 2024. Now, out of that, we are going to look at what percentage are tenants and what percentage are landlords. So the landlord population out of the adult population, the landlord is 2.8 million people, which makes up roughly about 6% of the adult population. And the people that are renting or tenants makes up about 34 to 35% of that adult population. And so you see a huge gap in the percentages. I mean, you're looking at nearly 13 million people that are in the rental market. And so you are seeing that, that basically is a power imbalance where you see that the tenants, the landlords are just a few, 2.8 million, but then you got a lot more of the population that are renting. And so this, in a way, should send a message to the voters, just to let them know what this government has done for them. This is the people that are basically renting, I will indicate as the poor and possibly the marginalized, and those that are just struggling to make ends meet. And not only that, also our nurses, our teachers, our policemen, our local council workers, people that are not in that income bracket, shop workers, people working in care homes, so this is the majority of the population. This Renters' Right Act is actually beneficial to these people, and so we must call this out and say well done to the government, and also to make people aware that this government have done this, brought in this law as a way of improving the lives of the millions, obviously over 12 million people in this country, and so they should be commended as such. Now, at the moment, the first part of this video is just going to be looking at what this changes is all about and what it means to you as a tenant. And so, for a starter, what is the purpose of this Renters' Right Act? Number one is to create a stronger right for the tenant, right? Because before, the tenants for many years were in a very weak position. This will be one of the key areas that was putting tenants in a very insecure spot, was the no-fault eviction. That means that even if there was something wrong, a tenant could not say it, because if they do, they get evicted without a reason. So this law also is to give the tenants a better protection, to protect them from things like rent price rises, rates, could just go up, and tenants didn't have a right basically to defend themselves. And so this is basically to create a better protection. And more especially, the third aspect of this act is to give the tenants security, more security. Because one of the worst things that could happen to anybody, especially for the average person that is working, is living in a place and not having that security within yourself, that you have a home to live in, and that you know that every now and then you could be evicted and you could be once again on the loose, trying to raise deposits. Because most of the time when you lose your place, the landlord will come in and say, oh, the place was not exactly as as you rented it. Of course, if somebody rents your house and they live in it for 5-10 years, you're not going to go and find a place. They only have to leave and keep the place clean. But sometimes they'll say, oh, the paint work is this, the flooring is done that. There will be so many multiples of reasons why the deposit that you've put down, which before were sometimes 1 month rent, 1 month deposit, you have to fork out this amount of money. It could be in the thousands of pounds. It could be 3,000, it could be 2,500, and your landlord will hold that money, and they will not give you that money, and they will send you away. And when you go away, you're going to have to go and find some more money to go to the next place. And sometimes when you're going, things like finding a reference, obviously you wouldn't have ended up on good terms, because if your landlord is trying to cheat you, it's not going to make you happy. But when you're going to look for another place, you have got to need that landlord's referral to go to the next place. So this puts tenants in a very terrible position. And so tenants, basically, which are the majority of the people, should recognize what this government has done for them and make that reflect in their voting. I'm not doing any political campaign or anything like that, because I can support either parties. Whoever is doing a good job for the nation is the one that I will say something good about. And so if the Tories have done in the longer period of time that they came to power, if they had done this, put this kind of act into force, I will surely have done a video and commended them and asked voters to support them in that respect. But in effect, we know that they didn't do that. And so we must actually commend this government to have done this sort of thing. So there is that security that, you know, the tenants now get, that they cannot just be thrown out of their places at the will of the landlord. So it's to create what we call it, is to create basically a fair balance, that sort of redress that imbalance. And we are saying, I am basically advocating that if the government is able to do this, then the government should also be able to move into places like, you know, the hiking prices from the supermarket. Literally every person that is selling stuff. I mean, I go to Tesco and I buy, you know, I buy my stuff and I'm in the checkout. Before, I'll buy a plastic bag for 5 pence. Then the plastic bag became 10 pence. Then it became 20 pence. Then it became 30 pence. Yesterday when I went, it was 40 pence for one plastic bag to put my stuff in. But the sad thing about it is that at the end of the day, Tesco, these obviously plastic, when they become waste, they will bundle them and they will send them to a country like Ghana to dispose these plastics off. And so when you go to a place like Ghana or many other African countries, you're going to find piles and piles of plastic and waste dumped on their grounds and also dumped in the sea. So they don't even find a foolproof way of maybe converting this plastic into some other, maybe building materials or whatever, and reusing them. Rather, they will dump it somewhere, but they charge me 40 pence. And I'm very sure that if this thing carries on, well, unchecked, then the next time I go, it'll be 50p, and a time will come, and it will not be too long ago that you go there and you're picking one plastic bag and they will tell you it's £1. Now, this is just a plastic bag thing that I'm talking about, but the whole system, markets in the UK, it's a terrible state, because once again, people, or you know, the suppliers are running around and just increasing prices anyhow and just making unnecessary profits from the ordinary person in the UK. And so if the government can deal with this Renters' Right Act, then indeed they should also move in the same capacity to address these other price increases with the supermarkets, with the filling stations, with so many, with the airports charging. You know, you take your car to an airport for a few minutes, and the amount of money that is being asked of you is just ridiculous, and you don't have any alternative. This is the sad part. And so I am advocating for all these type of things indeed to be looked at, but not to go off tangent. And so what, basically, for a starter, when is this Renters' Right Act coming into force? So the date is the 1st of May 2026. So from that day, every tenant in the UK should be ready and must know that the law has changed in their favor. All the tenants, they should be awake and know that. Obviously, with the time given, there is that possibility that a lot of landlords will offload their properties. You know, once again, once I was doing a research and I came across a fact that there was a particular person that owned over 600 properties in a particular county in the north of England. And so we may see a lot of offloading of properties back in the market. But that issue we will discuss in our next video that says what does the Renters' Right Act mean to the housing market in the UK? What is it going to mean? Because we do obviously hear about the fact that there's always housing shortages and stuff like that, but in reality there isn't, because when you see all these high-rise buildings that have been put up especially in London in the past 8 years, a lot of them are empty. There is no government regulation that is forcing these faceless landlords. You don't even know who owns these properties to actually put these properties on the market for rental, so that the prices, the rental rates will come down. And so all these are things that I'm personally advocating for. So what does the Renters' Right Act means to the tenant? One, it means that it is saying goodbye to the no-fault eviction. So this is one of the key areas, the no-fault eviction. So before, whereas, in the many years that the Tory government was in power, that your landlord could just come and just evict you. They didn't have to give any reason. They would just evict you. But this new law basically puts a stop to the no-fault eviction. But this does not necessarily give the tenant that opportunity to run wild, because we know that some tenants, they don't pay their rent on time. Some tenants have antisocial behavior. Some tenants are willfully damaging properties and just being very difficult tenants. And this is not what this law is about. This law is just to create a fair balance, that when you live in a property, if somebody buys, they have their own property and they bought a second property and they are renting it to you, that is also your home. And so if you're paying your rent on time, if you are not behaving in any way, but the property itself is not in a good state and there are things that are not right, then you are very much well within your rights to actually condition the landlord to fix those problems. Are you with me? Because the properties that they give to you must be good properties. And I think that this act is a very good thing, because it will also look at the entire housing rental market to actually uplift the state of properties that are out there for rental. Just like, people that are in the private hire industry that are conditioned by the mayor of London to buy electric vehicles to clean the air, because these people are on the road every day. And so in the same way, this will actually uplift the value and obviously the internal states of properties in the UK, because landlords will have to do it. And if they don't do it, then the tenant can surely go and spend that money and deduct that money from the bill and put everything in writing. And so this is one of the key aspects, that you cannot be evicted, and you can speak out if there is something wrong in the property and hold the landlord to accountability. But with all this, it doesn't mean that if the landlord needs to indeed maybe sell the property, or if they want to move into the property, or if they, if there is antisocial behavior and they want to deal with it, or if the person is falling behind rents, that the landlord could not take that tenant to court and have judgment in their favor. Yeah. So the second aspect, obviously, about what these changes means to the tenant is a goodbye to the fixed term contracts. So that before, if you were renting from obviously a landlord, then you would have had to, in effect, you would have had to be in some sort of a fixed term contract that if you get out of that contract, it's going to cost you money. So now you're going to have a rolling system, which is it rolls month after month, week after week, depending on how you sign it. And therefore, the tenant can also terminate the contract by just giving 2 months notice and going their way. Are you with me? And the landlord may also be in that position to do the same. maybe not so easy for the landlord, but if they give these notices, then if they say they are selling the house, then the house indeed must go on the market for them to sell it. If they are moving in, they indeed have to move in. Whatever the reasons, if they are found not to respond in that respect, that will be deemed illegal. And the ombudsman, so the private landlord ombudsman, is the guy to go to. So remember that, the private landlord ombudsman. So if there is anything going on wrong, and you try to deal with the landlord and it's not really happening, then you go to the ombudsman. It is better for you to go to the ombudsman probably than to go to court, because the court procedures can be long, but the ombudsman will look into it and give their recommendations, and 9 out of 10 times the landlord will abide to it. And so they cannot really hold you up like that, so that your tenancy is very flexible and you can give your notifications and walk away and not actually incur any cost based on this fixed term contract. The other benefit of this new Renters' Right Act is an end to the bidding wars. So the bidding wars, how does that happen? So let's say somebody has a property in a very nice area, let's say Dulwich or some place like that. They want to rent it out and the demand for the rental in that area is high. Then what they do is that, even though they will probably say that, okay, we rented this property for, let's say, 2,000 a month, but when you have a lot of people come and trying to get the same property, and some of them are offering higher rates, then that means that the landlord can now suddenly change and say, oh, I want 3,000 a month, and whoever gives me 3,000. So this new law ends that, so that whatever amount that you advertise the property for is what obviously the people will be expected to rent the property at that advertised rent price. So this is also very good because it creates stability and clarity in the renter market. What are the other issues? There is also that issue where that upfront money that was needed to rent a place was so high, and as I said earlier, 9 out of 10 times you always lose that money. You live in that property 2-3 years, and the landlord will, when the time comes for you to go, even if you have the place all nicely cleaned up, the landlord will come and make so many demands. You've done this, you've broken this, you do that. But of course, if you take the rent and the person lives there, there will surely be normal wear and tear. It's just like when I rent a vehicle, or when I'm doing a rent to buy or something, and I sign the contract and they are deducting that money weekly. Surely, if something happens to the vehicle, I can take it back and they fix it. If they cannot fix it, they give me another vehicle for me to carry on doing what I'm doing. And so if you rent a place to a person and you have and there's some reasonable level of damage done, that is why you take the rent. You're supposed to use part of the rent to refix the place. And so you would then lose that money. But now, with this new Renters' Right Act, which is coming into force on the 1st of May 2026, a landlord cannot charge you upfront money which is more than 1 month of the rent. Are you with me? That is the maximum amount, 1 month of the rent. So let's say if you were renting a place for, say, 1,500, then you were only obliged to put 1,500 down as the down payment. And I think that most of the time they will let you pay the rent before you live in it. So then that means that if you want to find a place that is renting for 1,500 a month, then in effect you need to have 3,000, so that on the day that you start the tenancy, you will pay 1,500. Are you with me? And then you pay 1,500 as a deposit, and then you start off with another 1,500, and it is not going to be more. That's the maximum. So in effect, you shouldn't be putting down 1,500 because that's the maximum. It is possible that you may be asked to put down 750, or even sometimes could be 500, or even a very small amount. But that is the maximum. So this is also good news for all the tenants. Then one of the key areas is discrimination. Yes. So that when somebody is renting a property, sometimes they don't really say it, but depending on how you look like, you may not be given that property. But in all fairness, that discrimination that they're talking about is not that type of a discrimination, but we're talking about discrimination where if somebody was on benefits, they also have a right to find a place to live. You know, because there are no council accommodations, or the council will tell you to go and find your own accommodation. Are you with me? And then they will subsidize its payment. And if you went to a landlord and let's say you were on benefit, the landlord will sometimes they can actually specifically express that if you are on benefit, don't even think about getting their property. And so this new Renters' Right Act abolishes that that kind of discrimination. And if it is known that, let's say I go to look for a property today and I find a property and I'm well, sort of within my rights to have that property, and the landlord refuses to rent me that property just because I'm on benefits and I'll be paid by the council or whatever, or universal credit or whatever, then if somebody else goes after me and they are giving that property, if I have the facts, I can actually raise a complaint with the private landlord ombudsman, and my case will be upheld. And so once again, this is a very fair way, because at the end of the day, somebody that is on benefit may be as disciplined in paying their rent as well as somebody that is working. There is no difference. It's the same. They are not going to be paying less, so they should not be discriminated against. And so once again, this Renters' Right Act makes that provision to protect people on benefits. So people on benefits, once again, you must know which government is doing something in your favor, because rent is a very big deal. Big deal for most of the millions of renters. The amount that it takes from your disposable income is huge, and so any act benefiting you in that way is a very serious act that shouldn't be downplayed. And finally, pets are going to be welcomed. I mean, sometimes when you think about it, it's very sad to think that if you do not own a property, that means that you cannot have a pet. You want to go and rent it, they tell you, oh, sorry, no dogs, no cats, no this, no that. And so all these things, all you pet or will be pet owners, this is a good act for you. And so once again, people should be allowed to have their pets with them. I suppose what is key is obviously you need to stipulate something in the tenancy agreement if the pet was to cause any damage to the property. And obviously, surely there will be evidence if they do scratch something with their paws or whatever, then there must be something put in the clause also to protect the landlord. And so as we look into this Renters' Right Act, this is just the face of it. At some stage in subsequent videos, I will be delving a lot deeper into the details of how this thing is going to be working. But it seems if one was to look at it, it may seem that it was maybe something disproportionately to the benefit of the tenant. But that is not the case. The reason is that the landlord, he's had a run for so many years. Probably one would say the past 15, 20 years. The landlord has had that power to sit on top of the tenant for that length of time. And so this Renters' Right Act is just to create a level playing field where both the landlord and the tenant will have some degree of power. It's a power sharing thing, so that when things are wrong, the tenant can speak up and demand accountability without the fear that they will be evicted. The tenant will have security because the landlord already has a home to live in, and they are so wealthy to have another home. It's not a crime to own other properties, but you must also respect that that property that you are now renting to somebody is somebody's home, just like your own home. And so if the person demonstrates that they are a responsible person and they challenge you for you not putting your place in order, then surely they should be well in their rights to do that. And so we're talking about stronger rights for the tenants. We're talking about better protection for the tenant. We're talking about more security for the tenant. So this is what this Labour government, they have done under Keir Starmer. And I think that they should be indeed applauded for that good act. Obviously, the King is also signed it. So my assumption is that he is also in support of this act. So everybody should watch out on the 1st of May 2026 and make sure that they are indeed demanding their rights as it should be. I think that even from now, if something is wrong, you should be able to speak out because the act is in place and is definitely coming into force. So thank you very much once again for engaging with this channel. If you're a landlord and you think that you disagree with this new Renters' Right Act, or if you're a tenant and you think this thing is too good for you, then surely let me know that in the comments. So thank you once again for watching, and pardon me for not coming sooner with this video. Life's challenges we must all face, and sometimes the things that we want to do we are not able to do for one reason or the other. But yes, we're going to be on this topic, and we're going to look at the potential or what this may mean to the housing market in the foreseeable future in the UK. So once again, thank you for staying with us and watching this video. Goodbye.